This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Go to the link in the description below so they know that I sent you. Hello everyone, I'm Nissa, and it is Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. Normally, these videos look back at Magic's history and rank cards in a particular category based on their competitive performance. But every time a new set comes out and I do my limited review content for the new set, the review takes over that week's MTG Top 10 too, which becomes dedicated to the cards I think are the biggest bombs in the new set. War of the Spark is now on Magic Online and Magic Arena, and the paper pre-release in many places is today. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the 10 cards I think you should be most excited about getting in a pack one, pick one situation in draft or in your sealed pool. These lists are usually not that difficult to make because most sets don't have a whole lot more bombs than just 10, but this set has an unusual number, and it took me a while to narrow it down to my top 10. Alright, let's get started with number 10. At number 10, I have Nico Bolas, Dragon God. This was a card that I struggled with whether or not I wanted it to make this list because it's 3 colors and it's so difficult to cast. This means that sometimes you're going to get it in your sealed pool and you just can't play it. Sometimes you'll take it in a pack one, pick one scenario and then black isn't open at all. You'll get it later in packs and be really disappointed you can't play it sometimes. But I think the sheer power of Nico Bolas means that it's worth all of those risks. It's just such a good card. I mean, this format, first of all, has planeswalkers in it, a lot of them, and because of that, that means Nico Bolas will not infrequently have extra loyalty abilities. Even without those, it has 3 really powerful abilities. One which lets you draw a card and gets rid of one of your opponent's permanents or a card from their hand. One which lets you kill just about anything in the format, creatures or planeswalkers. And the other is an instant win scenario. Should you get his loyalty that high, if your opponent doesn't control a planeswalker, they're going to lose the game. So, he does the things you want all planeswalkers to do. He can draw you cards and he can function as a removal spell. You can alternate between those, but the point is he's going to give you a huge advantage in any game where you can actually cast him. Doing so might be difficult, and it almost made me exclude him from the list, but I think he's strong enough that he's worth those risks anyway. At number 9, I have Nissa, who shakes the world, a monocolored planeswalker who does a whole lot of stuff. She makes all your forests add double the mana, and in this format I do think that matters some because the green decks especially are going to be good at ramping. But I think what really puts her over and makes her great is her +1 ability. She also starts with a decent amount of loyalty, but her +1 makes one of your lands into a creature. It also has vigilance and haste. And that's pretty great because the creature can attack right away, but it can also protect her, assuming your opponent is sort of defenseless. Even if they're not, the fact that you can make this and then it can protect her is great, and she can just make a new 3/3 every turn, and that's without Proliferate, which can add loyalty counters to her and add counters to your lands to make them even bigger. Her ultimate is not the most game-breaking one around, but obviously if you can make all your lands indestructible and they're also all 3/3s at this point, you're going to be in pretty great shape overall. I think she's just going to take over games with that +1 ability, and a lot of decks aren't going to be able to overcome what she does, and for that reason, I think you're pretty happy to first pick her. Number 8, we have another planeswalker. Surprise, surprise, there's going to be several on this list. Sarkhan the Masterless is another 5-mana planeswalker who comes down with 5 loyalty, which is nice. His static ability is also not the most exciting one, at least if you're just expecting it to do something without Sarkhan's help. Creatures getting damaged when they attack equal to each dragon you control isn't a big deal. But it is kind of, because Sarkhan makes dragons himself. He can come down and make a dragon right away. But I think what really makes him great, in addition to the fact that he can protect himself right away, is that he can then also make himself, and if you have any other planeswalkers in play, he makes them into dragons as well. So imagine, -3, make a 4/4 dragon. Your opponent can't really get to your Sarkhan because they don't have a big enough creature to attack, and that's going to happen a lot, especially because the 1 damage thing means a lot of creatures, your 4/4 can trade for their 5/5 now. And, if that's your worst case scenario, you're not going to be too sad because then you can use the +1 and at least attack with Sarkhan. But imagine you just make the 4/4 and then you attack. On the next turn, you make Sarkhan into something, a dragon, and then you attack for 8. Then if you have another planeswalker in play, it could be 12. It's just going to add up. And the great thing is, after you just tick him up once, he can make a dragon again if you need him to. And suddenly, he's at least given you 2 dragons without too much help and probably done like 8 damage. And his static ability gets even better if you do that too. So overall, I think the dragons he can make will take over games. And the fact that he can join the party himself and help any of your other planeswalkers joins the party makes him a really big bomb. At number 7, we have the first of the gods to make the list. I have 3 of them on it in total. That's another one where it was sort of hard. I think all 5 are bombs, obviously. If you watch my set review, you know that. But I put the 3 that I think are the best on this list, and Ilharg is one of them. Between being a 5-mana 6/6 with trample and having a powerful trigger that lets you put a creature into play attacking every time he attacks, he's pretty strong. It is worth noting that sometimes you shouldn't put your creature down to attack because either it's not really in a favorable situation for it to attack, or it might just be better to straight up cast it because it stays in play. But I think there's enough upside there that you're going to be happy to do it most of the time. He also has the God clause that all the gods in this set has, meaning he's just going to keep coming back, which is pretty great. So he's huge on his own, and he helps you develop your board with extra attackers and stuff like that, and that's pretty great. At number 6, I have Roalesk Apex Hybrid. He's the only other gold card I put on this list other than Nico Bolas. And the reason I have him higher isn't necessarily because in a vacuum, I think Roalesk is better. I think it's actually pretty close between the two. But Roalesk is a lot easier to play. Yes, he's 2 colors. That's already 1 less than Nico Bolas. But green is his main color, and green decks are going to be really good at splashing. They have commons and uncommons that can help with that, in addition to the artifacts that are around. So if you take this pack 1, pick 1, your chances of playing it are way more likely than playing Nico Bolas because, first of all, he has no green and he has a much more difficult mana cost. Roalesk will be much more likely to see play despite being gold, and it does a lot of work. I mean, a 5-mana 4/5 flyer with also trample that puts 2 counters onto one of your other creatures is great. Then, even if he dies, like if your opponent kills him right away, chances are good that you're going to have at least put 4 +1/+1 counters on something that's in play, and most of the time you'll get to do more than that because, proliferate affects all your permanents. That's just the worst case scenario. But if your worst case scenario is your opponent has to use a removal spell and you make one of your creatures a lot bigger, that's a pretty good deal. And I like Roalesk Apex Hybrid a lot. I think you first pick him the vast majority of the time, and you're not very often going to have any of the other 5 cards that are above it on this list in the same pack, unless one of them's foil. Number 5, we have our second god, who is God Eternal Bontu. He's also got great stats. All the gods do. He's got an evasive ability and menace, and what's really great about him is his Enter the Battlefield ability, which is made even better by the fact that, just like the other gods, he gets tucked into your library, meaning you're going to get to use that ability again, and that ability allows you to sacrifice any number of permanents and draw that many cards. Bontu may be a little less powerful if you play him on turn 5. You may only be drawing 1 card, but if you're playing a 5-mana 5/6, sacking a land to draw 1 card, and you have a 5/6 menace in play, that's pretty much a bomb. And as the game goes on, you're going to have more useless permanents lying around that you can just sacrifice, whether they're excess lands, creatures that have auras on them, creatures who are irrelevant on the battlefield who you'd love to replace. Bontu can end up drawing you a huge number of cards and give you this huge evasive body that's difficult to kill, and repeatedly do this because it's difficult to kill while you just reload your hand, and your opponent, meanwhile, doesn't have an effective way to do that because there's not really anything else in the format that does it as well as Bontu. So her static ability is really good. The fact that you get to draw a card every time a creature you control dies is nice. And she obviously synergizes well with that because she can make zombies who can protect her. But not only do they protect her, you also get to draw cards off of them, which is great because every time one chump blocks or trades, you get to draw a card. Her -4 can thin out your opponent's board, like immediately. So you have 2 options here. Her +1 if you're the one at parity or ahead, and her -4 is maybe what you do if you're behind. And you get to actually replace your 2 creatures, assuming you have 2 to sacrifice, because you get to draw cards off of them. Your opponent will not. But mostly, I think the best thing to do with her is going to be to make zombies, and then probably eventually use her ability and go back and forth. Her ultimate is also game-ending, obviously enough, because it's only a one-sided effect. And it isn't that hard to get to it. If you can just tick up 1 every turn and keep drawing cards, which in turn is going to let you play things to protect her even better, you're going to get to 9 without a whole lot of effort. And that's what makes her one of the biggest bombs in the format. At number 3, I have Gideon Blackblade. So Gideon is a little different than the others on this list because he's probably at his best earlier, but he's still a bomb late, and I think that's enough to get him here. So early, obviously, he's a 3-mana 4/4 with Indestructible, which is a big problem for your opponent. They're not going to be able to block that at all. But what I think really makes him good is the fact that he has these other 2 abilities on top of just being a really efficient creature if he needs to be. And these other 2 abilities are pretty good, and they give him some late game value. His +1 gives really powerful keyword abilities to creatures you have. He can make another friend indestructible. or give it lifelink, or give it vigilance. Vigilance will let creatures protect him a little more effectively, potentially. And if you tick up his loyalty a few times, you can also kill a permanent. And once you've done that, and Gideon's still in play, you're going to be in really great shape. He doesn't protect himself all on his own, but I think the fact that he's a threat all on his own sort of makes up for that. The fact that he's a creature all on his own makes up for that. Overall, I think he's a great card, and you should be pretty happy to first pick him. At number 2, I have Ugin, the Ineffable. Ugin is really, really good, and he gets even better because of the fact that he's colorless, meaning you will be able to play him in any deck. There's a 100% chance you play him if you pick him. Can't say that about any other cards on this list, and he's a huge bomb on top of that. So his static ability is less relevant than any of the others we've looked at so far. There aren't enough colorless spells for it to matter most of the time. You do have Ugin's Conjurant, which will be 2 cheaper, which, will be nice. There's a few other decent colorless spells, but not very many. But I think what makes him great is that he's both a removal spell and he can protect himself. Those are the 2 things you want. His +1 makes a 2/2. And you also get to draw a card, essentially. You exile a card when you make the 2/2, and then when that 2/2 dies, you get that card put into your hand. So, protects himself, draws you cards, and kills things. Those are really the trifecta of the best planeswalkers. Then, you can also use his ultimate, which isn't really an ultimate. He's only got 2 abilities, but his -3 lets you destroy almost every permanent in the format. There's very few it doesn't let you kill, like an opposing Ugin maybe. And you can play him and use that immediately if the board state calls for it, or you can just start making the spirit tokens to protect him and draw cards. Kind of like Liliana. Liliana for 6 mana does have a very similar +1 ability. Ugin's is just as good, really, and, he's easier to cast. And he can also destroy permanents a little more easily. She has a better static ability. But overall, I think I would take Ugin over Liliana, if only because, there's like a 75% chance you play Liliana, 100% you play Ugin, and they are very comparable. So, yeah. So what's the biggest bomb in this set? Well, I think it's God Eternal Oketra. So all the gods are huge bombs, as I said. 2 of them didn't even make this list because there's so many bombs in this set. 3 of them did, and I think God Eternal Oketra is the best of the bunch. As a 5 mana 3/6 with double strike, which would be a really good card already, Oketra also happens to make creature tokens really, really, really easily. It doesn't ask you to do anything crazy. All you have to do is play creature spells, which your deck is going to mostly be anyway. So if you even play Oketra and cast 1 creature spell, you're going to be in a really good place because you get a 4/4 creature. It has vigilance too. I mean, why not? So you're in really, really good shape just from 1 creature. And if Oketra stays in play for another turn, your opponent's probably just dead. On top of that, there's not a lot of good ways to kill it in this set because it's just going to come back and haunt you and keep coming back. It doesn't have an into the battlefield ability you can abuse. It just has a ridiculous when you cast a creature spell trigger you can abuse. So those are my picks for the 10 biggest bombs in the set. Like I said, I'm less confident than usual about this list. It'll be interesting to see if this all pans out as the top 10. There are lots of cards who are 11, 12, 13 that I could see easily making this list, including the gods and some other powerful planeswalkers. Maybe some of the finales. The white one's probably the strongest. But this is where I decided to go for now for my picks for the 10 biggest bombs in the set. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s and limited content featuring War of the Spark, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.